Chapter 10, Blending Grants and Safety. This chapter discusses the importance of sales practices as an eligible requirement for obtaining a grant and explores grants that are available to the fire service, classifications of grants, the components of a grant, and the awarding of a grant. Our objectives: explain the importance of safe practices as an eligible requirement for obtaining a grant. List the advantages of using community organizations for funding opportunities. Name some of the companies that support the fire service on the national level. Explain the benefits gained by using research and education grants for firefighter safety. Describe how a program C grants can benefit an organization. Discuss the benefits of using a safer grant for volunteer recruitment. Illustrate the importance of compiling a list of organizations that are Fire Life Safety Initiative 16 registered. Explain the relationship between developing effective grant requests and grant priorities. Explain the influence of an effective grant narrative in being awarded a grant. One of the unique aspects of the emergency service is making do with what is available. Unfortunately, most of us cannot afford every tool for every possible situation, and we cannot always wait around for someone to bring it. In 1975, the National Fire Protection Association began working on a standard for self-contained breathing apparatus and ultimately released NFPA 1981, which is the standard of open-circuit self-contained breathing apparatus, or SCBA for emergency services. At the time, SCBAs were readily available from several manufacturers, but many departments did not have enough for all the firefighters on scene or could not afford to upgrade what they had. In 2001, fire equipment grants became a viable option for fire departments to improve safety through the Assistance to Firefighter Grant, or AFG program, which is offered by the United States Fire Administration. Grants are a form of financial assistance used to promote a specific goal. They are not loans or financial aid, and organizations are not entitled to grants. Many times, grants are intended to support the operation of the organization applying for the grant, also known as the grantee. Usually, these are for one-time purchases, such as for high-pressure airbags or even a fire engine. Other grants have a goal of furthering the cause of the organization that is offering the grant, such as the grant will be intended to stimulate organizational change in the grantee. An example: the Emergency Medical Service for Children offers a grant to states that increase injury prevention activities for at-risk children. Now, emergency responders who are interested in obtaining grants need to know who offers grants, what type of grants are available, and the guidelines for obtaining those grants. Now, in the past several years, the federal government has been one of the leading agencies to offer grants to the fire departments. In fact, the federal government has more than 1,000 grants available through federal agencies for many different needs. And in 2001, FEMA released the final report for its first year of their AFG program. For the first time in history, a federal grant program was available that was capable of replacing the complete SCBA inventories of numerous fire departments across the country. The federal government is not the only grantor. Many state governments offer grants to emergency service organizations within their state. Other common sources include your community organizations, local businesses, and foundations. Community organizations is one of the easiest ways to obtain small grants, and it is through your community organizations. They can be locally operated, such as homeowners associations, chamber of commerce, or maybe even the Women's League or Rotary Club or something of that nature. Or they can be a local chapter of larger, possibly international organizations like your Lions Club, Kiwanis International Fraternal Order of Eagles, and said earlier the Rotary International. Now, there are several advantages to using community organizations as a result of their purpose, connections, and locations. Companies are a great resource for grants and other special funding, but should be matched with a specific need. An example, the local pet store might jump at the chance to help cover the cost of training a new arson dog. Now, some national chains have grants that have been utilized by the emergency services, such as Lowe's Heroes Program and Target's Field Trip Grant. Other such places as like Home Depot has grants, certain power companies have grants. You really just have to look in your community and come up. The Firehouse Subs has a lot of grants out there, especially if you have a firehouse sub in your community. They do give a lot of fire department grants for equipment and needs and things of that nature. Although many local insurance companies have community involvement programs, 3 of the largest national programs are offered by the Fireman's Fund. The Heritage Program is one of the most beneficial to the fire service that has provided numerous types of equipment to fire departments in addition to funding national fire service efforts. Another one, FM Global, which grants are available to fire prevention programs such as smoke detector installations or fire safety education, as well as pre-fire planning software and computers. State Farm has grants that are available for fire prevention, but with a significant focus on motor vehicle safety and education programs. Foundations are generally nonprofit organizations established to fund specific needs or assist in certain geographical areas. An example would be the Hartford Foundation. Although some foundations will offer grants to government units, some are available only to nonprofit organizations. As a result, and if you don't have one, many fire departments have recognized the advantage of creating their own nonprofit organization to assist in obtaining funding. So like a fraternal order or something of that nature, where donations can go directly to the fire department by way of the nonprofit organization. So they get the funds and it goes directly to the fire department. That way it doesn't have to go into, like, say, the county or the city's general funds and may have gone somewhere else, or maybe they're not eligible. Now, as said earlier, many grants are used to encourage grantees to further the cause of the grantor. So the example with the AFG program continues to focus on firefighter life and safety, as well as the safety of the public the firefighter serves. Now, applicants who demonstrate that their request will have a direct effect on the life safety will receive the highest consideration. Or in the example of State Farm, if you show that what you're going to be using the money for will help with motor vehicle accident prevention, then you're going to be moved higher up the list because it's furthering their own initiative, the people that are giving the money to help their cause. So it's kind of like a mutual benefit for both parties. Operating grants are intended to provide funding for the everyday cost, such as heating bills, salaries, and things of that nature. Of nonprofit organizations, but seldom are offered to emergency services. Now, many law enforcement agencies utilize grants to fund a school resource officer. Safe School Initiative grants are available to provide salary funding to reduce delinquency. Now, organizations for public health or awareness, like cancer research, receive operating grants for their continued existence. The foundation understands that if an organization is not successful, the money invested in it was essentially wasted. So funding components such as leadership, legal advice, and human resource management are good investments. Now, many times they include specific goals or benchmarks that must be achieved with the funding. Research and education grants. The medical and technology worlds have utilized research grants for quite some time now in an effort to find medical cures and solve industry-wide problems. Large-scale projects are normally awarded to educational institutions or technology companies because the time requirement for the scientific method associated with the research are usually out of the reach of an individual fire department. Example: the Sustainability Articulate Research and Education Grant is funded by the federal government to assist farmers and ranchers develop and experiment with new ideas to improve farming. Calls for proposals list components of projects that the foundations encourage, which makes the request more likely to be awarded. So again, what they're trying to tell you here is any grant that you're applying for, find out what the goals of the organization that is providing the grant are and try to mirror your pitch to get the grant where it shows that you're furthering not only your cause but their cause as well. The Western SARE Administrating Council specifically identified 3 components of impact and outcomes that are equally acceptable to the fire service for this type of grant, and that is identification, measurement, and dissemination. Impacts. An example: the installation of dry hydrant pipes installed in a lake and pond to allow quick hookups and drafting as a water source for fires could be something for which to apply for a grant. Many are quick response grants. Now, quick response or mini grants are sometimes offered periodically throughout the year, and it is intended to supply funds for immediate or unexpected needs. They are easy to apply for with little or no wait for an answer. Now, they do fund small programs. So for an example, bottle bombs teaming up with EMS and law enforcement for a presentation at middle and high schools to show the dangers of mixing chemicals and the effects of an unexpected explosion. Donor-advised grants. With donor-advised or donor-driven grants, donors may have a specific need in mind when making a charitable donation to a foundation. So the foundation is thereby required to use the funds for the specific need. For example, sudden infant death syndromes. They may be ensuring that whatever you're using for goes to the treatment or prevention of sudden infant deaths. Now, simple matching is a need to the right donor is many times the key to getting the grant. Now, one big avenue out there is the Program C grants, and this really falls under fire prevention and safety. As we know, they tend to get the smallest slices of the pie when we're looking at budgets. So with the fire prevention safety grants are a component of the AFG program and are broken down into 2 general categories: fire prevention, Initiative 14, and research, again, which involves Initiative 7. Although research grants are not that common for emergency services, fire prevention is popular. Reasons for this include fire departments plan for the purchase of replacement equipment like fire hose, but don't have money in the budget for fire safety trailers, coloring books, maybe fire extinguisher trainers, and things of that nature. Now, grantors prefer to fund cutting-edge and exciting programs as opposed to replacing old equipment. As the name implies, a seed grant provides the startup cost for a new program. Now, many times, the grant provides funding for more than 1 year on a decreasing scale, so the intent is to allow the organization to focus its effort on making the new program a success rather than spending its time trying to fund it. Now, seed programs slowly wean the grantee into supporting the cost of the operation after the initial funding cycle. Equipment grants. To convince a grantor to supply the money needed to obtain equipment, the grantee must demonstrate both a substantial need and proof that the organization will have the resources to manage and maintain it. One capital grant is the AFG Fire Station Construction Grant. Now, this grant provides funding for the construction of a new fire station or remodeling an existing one. Again, however, you have to show how, if it's a new station, the county or city or organization is going to be able to pick up and pay the bills, and they're just not going to, lock the doors shut. Now, staffing grants. Now, these are very interesting. For departments that have the facilities but have been unable to provide the personnel, the staffing for adequate fire and emergency response, the SAFER grant is available. Now, the goal is to raise the number of trained firefighters available to meet the standard of NFPA 1710 or NFPA 1720. Similar to a seed grant program, the SAFER grant is intended to provide initial funding that tapers off over a specific period of time. Now, the SAFER grants can be used for rehiring laid-off firefighters, hiring new firefighters, or volunteer recruitment and retention, as well as hiring additional personnel. But at some point, again, that money goes away and it's up to the institution to pick up the tab. Now, when the economy took a downturn several years ago, there were a lot of departments that had SAFER grants out there and was, planning on these new fire departments that they had, or new firefighters that they had trained picking up the bill. But unfortunately, budgets made it go away, so they didn't have the funds to put these new firefighters on. So, for example, DeKalb County during that time period had a recruit class that they basically trained and got through, and when it was time for them to go on shift, they didn't have the money to do so. So they ended up basically laying off that entire group. Once you have identified possible sources for funding and a need has been identified, it's time to research the available grants for the best possible match. Lynn Mary Panillo, author of Professional Grant Writer, The Definitive Guide to Writing Success, says many grants are unsuccessful due to the lack of planning and because the applicant did not follow the instructions. Now, there are several aspects to picking the best match. You look at your eligibility, the grant priorities, and of course, sustainability. They just don't want to throw money at something and then have the program wither and die on the vine. Eligibility of grant recipients should be one of the first aspects of the applicable of grants that is eligible for the grantee. It is not uncommon for grantors to require specific certifications or to allow only specific organizations to be eligible. Many federal grants require applicants to register through Dun and Bradstreet's or DMB and Data Universe Numbering System, which is a 9-digit number assigned to organizations and businesses. Federal grants may also require systems for awarded management, registration as a federal contractor to be awarded for funds. Now, Initiative 10 calls for all grant programs in the fire service to require safe practice by organizations to even be eligible. No mechanisms exist for the organizational accountability required by this initiative. The Fire Service needs to commit to the creation of a web-based Fire Life Safety Initiative registry, which would include the specific safe practice requirements that emergency service organizations must meet to comply with Initiative Number 10, thus making them eligible to apply for certain grants. Some firefighter grants have eligibility requirements specific to the emergency service itself. When selecting grants for a specific need, it is important to carefully read about the grant priorities. Potential priorities such as regional agreements, environmental responsibility, specific end-user or risk groups, or a specific purpose, to name a few. The AFG Guidance and Application Kit for 2010 lists the priorities used to award funds for equipment with regards to replacement equipment, additional equipment, and new equipment. And this is updated every year in terms of what AFG feels the major focus should be that year. So when you're applying, do so early, get all the facts and figures, and get all the information in, and make sure that your request parallels with what the goal of the grant is, of course, as well as make sure that you are. Now, whether the grant is supporting an existing program or starting new ones, almost all want to ensure the program is sustainable. Some organizations, such as Everyone Goes Home campaign, receives operating money in the form of grant year after year, but these type of grants are relatively rare in the fire service. Most grantors want to see the benefits of the award for the years to come. Components of the grant application that should be considered: research and evaluation, the narrative, and the budget. Research and evaluation. One of the easiest ways to scare off amateur grant writers is for a grant application to question the methodology involved in this project. Now, this could relate to either the research used to identify a need for your request or the means of evaluating its effectiveness once the program is complete. Now, there are two types of research out there, quantitative and qualitative. Now, quantitative, the root word quantity is referring to a specific number. This type of research uses a hypothesis and then backs it up with hard numbers to prove its validity. So that can be such things as maybe surveys or questions or hard run numbers, things of that nature. Qualitative research looks at the quality or perception involved. Example would use interviews and opinions to provide a need. Sometimes grant writers choose qualitative method over quantitative because they believe it is easier than coming up with hard facts. Unfortunately, many sources suggest that statistics are more reliable than opinions, and that it may actually be easier to use quantitative methods to stay focused on a specific need. The narrative. Many grants available for emergency service organization requires a need or a problem statement as a component of the narrative section, which is generally followed by a description of your proposed solution. Remember that almost everyone who is applying for the same money has a similar need. Firefighters understand the three tiers to describe the operational event at a structure fire, such as fire attacks are considered to be either offensive or defensive, and that would be your strategic level. They may employ the use of a master stream device, and that's an example of a tactical level. And they require persons to provide supplemental water supply to make it work, and that's the task level. If you arrange your thoughts in the manner above, you can follow the same system for grant writing. In Proposals That Work, a guide for planning dissertations and grant proposals, the author suggests breaking down the narrative section into 3 distinct classifications that can be compared to the specific level of an effective fire attack. First, signification, and that's your strategic level. 1 or 2 paragraphs that should introduce the problem or a need statement. Again, your significance. Next, at the tactical level, what is your objectives? Working components used to achieve a specific goal. These are specific rules to keep in mind when laying out the objectives of a proposal. And that is, limit the objectives, be confident in your objectives, and have objectives that are objective. Then you have your procedure or your task level. And in this section, that explains exactly how the objectives will be met. Now, many times, grantors judging proposals use a mathematical scoring system to better compare one proposal against another. So if you have all these facts and figures in place, it really adds more checkboxes to help justify your program and why it stands out above the rest. Grantors are essentially hiring someone to complete a task that either they cannot do or do not want to do. There are several reasons someone might pick one contractor over another. So they may look at professional appearances, qualifications, timelines, prices, and guarantees. Again, these are all things to be mindful of when putting your narrative together and including it in there. Some grant applications rely heavily on that narrative, while others leave little room for one. Review the application carefully and look for opportunities to make yourself stand out from everyone else. Because grants are predominantly requests for funds, virtually all grant applications require some sort of budget to be put together. The financial component of your proposal will be scrutinized as much as the narrative, so it is important to read the application carefully, ensure your budget meets their requirements. Now, there are several parts of a budget that may be required and should be addressed, and this includes direct expenses, such as these are the actual costs of purchasing, rentals, or other forms of compensation as a component of the grant. You have in-kind contributions, and some grantors require a specific commitment from the grantee that they will invest in the success of the program. The total amount requested, which is finally the application will include the total requested amount, the grant will be analyzed and therefore evaluated both objectively and subjectively. Objective analysis, the evaluator attempts to compare apples to apples for competitive grants. Now, the subjective analysis, the evaluators uses their interpretation of your application to rank it and compare it to other requests. When you're awarded a grant, there are 3 additional aspects you should be aware of: the contract, the deadlines, and the reports. The contract. Usually you'll receive a contract with the notification of your award. Now, this contract is a legal document that needs to be signed and returned to the granting agency. It lays out the agreement for the grant and usually includes such components as a time period, the amount awarded, if there's any in-kind contributions, program goals, and reporting requirements. Make sure you always report what is spent and what is done and how many people were trained, if it's something of that nature. They want to see that the money is actually going to some good. Now, if you fall behind in any of these components, it's quite possibly in that contract that they require you to return some or all of the funding. Deadlines. Deadlines were important in the application process and are just vital throughout the life of the grant. At times, funding is tied to benchmarks. So they may say, well, we're only going to give you half the funding up front, and halfway through you have to have XYZ done to get the rest. Reports. The last deadline involves submission of final reports. The final report is your chance to prove to the granting agency that it made a wise investment. By doing that, you're going to open yourself up to receive more grants from that organization. Remember that your final report will be used as a tool if you ever apply again or wish to be considered for future grants, not only from that institution, but other institutions. You could use as a tool, which basically shows that, hey, you successfully managed grant in the past, these were the outcomes and accomplishment, and it just adds more credence to your project because you've had experience and you have been successful in the past. One of the greatest opportunities for improved firefighter safety is a sustainability increase in the number of grants available. With the introduction of federal grants for equipment, personnel, and even fire stations, opportunities have proliferated. Organizations can be passed over if they do not understand how the grant process works and how to increase their chances. Initiative 10 calls for the blending of grants with firefighter safety. Once we establish criteria, agencies can conform and ensure the safety of their personnel. Summary. Grantors are organizations that offer grants. They can be community organizations, businesses, and foundations. Community organizations are sources for financial assistance due to their purpose, connection, and location. Grants are classified by type, such as operating, research and education, quick response, donor advised, program seed, as well as equipment and staffing. When choosing a grant, note the eligible requirements, the grant policies, and the sustainability. Grant priorities may prioritize replacement equipment over additional or new ones. Many grants have common components that include research and evaluation, the narrative, and the budget. It is helpful to write the narrative in 3 distinct classification levels, 1 being the significance, 2 being your objectives, and 3 procedures. When awarded a grant, organizations normally require a contract, a deadline, and reports. Okay, gang, well, good luck in finding your grants. And if you haven't done so, make sure you go through the case study and read it. If you have any questions, you can email me at aroberts@athenstech.edu, or you can call me at 706-357-0162. Until next time, be safe and have a great shift.